happy to welcome Dr. Breus here today to do our seminar on sleep. Thank you so much for coming along. We really appreciate it.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And so what we're doing today is Dr. Breus is going to go through a seminar that he's made for us on sleep and sort of very applicable to poker and improving your focus. And then we're going to have a time for a short Q&A at the end. We do have some questions already in the Facebook group, and then he's been kind enough to say he's also going to come back and do another Q&A in a few weeks or a month's time when you've had time to process this information and start to use the techniques. So once again, thank you so much for that. And,
no, it's my pleasure. Happy to do it.
And then do you want me to sort of hand over to you now? Do you want to go ahead with the seminar? And okay, guys, so I'll sort of mute myself so you don't hear me. And I'll put you in the good hands of the doctor.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Elliot. So first of all, thank you all for having an interest in better sleep. I am a poker player myself. I'm fully willing to admit that. As a matter of fact, when Ryan approached me, I was pretty excited because I had met, it's kind of a funny story, going back now almost 10 years, I had met Kathy Liebert, who, as everybody knows, is one of the top female poker players. And at the time, she was the first female poker player, I think she still is, to win more than $1 million in a tournament. And we had a nice casual conversation. And she explained to me that she had difficulty sleeping, especially the night before a tournament or after a tournament, things like that. And we never really did anything about it, but it's something that I've always kind of thought about. And I've been a lifelong poker player. My dad taught me the game when I was 16 years old, and I've been playing ever since. And I love it, and I enjoy the idea of giving back to everyone out there. So with that, what I'd love to do is share my knowledge with you about sleep. I've created a presentation specifically for poker players. This is the first time I'm ever giving this talk. So it might not be as smooth as some of my other talks if you've seen me on the internet, but I think you'll find it pretty interesting. But I thought I would go through specific areas where poker players are going to need some help. But first, before I do that, we need to understand what is sleep, how does sleep work in the brain and in the body, because that will help you understand some of the techniques that I'm going to offer up later on in the lecture. So to start, first of all, the thing to realize is that sleep is basically made of two systems. There's something called your sleep drive, and that's a lot like hunger, right? So I'm hungry, I eat something, and that hunger begins to dissipate. The same holds true with sleep. It turns out that there's when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is adenosine. Adenosine is it's a compound that works its way through the bloodstream into the brain, and it goes to very specific receptor sites. As more and more adenosine lock into these receptor sites, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. As an aside, if you look at the molecular structure of adenosine and you look at the molecular structure of caffeine, they're off by one molecule. So caffeine fits nicely into that receptor site and blocks that adenosine, which is why caffeine makes you feel less sleepy. So that's how sleep drive works. It's buildup of adenosine over the course of a day. 14, 16, 18 hours of the day, lots of adenosine makes you feel sleepy. But that's not the only thing that you need. You also need sleep rhythm. So what is rhythm? Rhythm is called your circadian rhythm. So just like hunger, when you get hungry around breakfast time, lunchtime, and dinner time, the same holds true with sleep, as most people have a tendency to be sleepy somewhere in the 10:30 to 11:30 range. So when your sleep rhythm is in sync and your sleep drive is high, and these two meet and are balanced, you sleep well. However, if either one of these is off, that's when you can have a sleep disorder. So as an example, there are instances where you might have very high drive, but your rhythm might not be right. So think about it like this. If you've ever been outside, had an exhausting day, you come in and you say to yourself, oh, I am so exhausted. I'm just going to crawl into bed a couple hours earlier. I'm going to catch up on my sleep. You fall asleep because you have quick, you might fall asleep quickly because your sleep drive is so high, but within 30 minutes you wake up and boom, you can't fall back asleep, right? That's because you're going to bed too early at that point. You've got lots of drive, but not a lot of rhythm, and that's going to throw you off. The same holds true in the opposite direction is for some people, they can have a problem where They have lots of rhythm. They go to bed at the right time, but there's very little sleep drive because maybe they took an extended nap earlier in the evening, fell asleep while watching a ball game or a game show on TV, something like that. So again, that's when we see a problem, is when the drive and the rhythm aren't balanced, we have a sleep disorder. The good news here is that this is something that's easily remedied and something that most people can fix pretty quickly. Now, this slide is a little bit different. This is what's called a hypnogram. And so this actually represents the different stages of sleep. So the orange here you can see is wake. Then you go from wake down to stage 1 and 2, which is classified as light sleep. Then you go down into stages 3 and 4, which is that dark blue, and that's deep sleep. Then you go back up to stage 2 again. Then you go into REM sleep, which is represented by this light blue. So the things to notice about this graph are the deep blue, it seems to be front loaded into the first third of the night. The other thing to notice is that REM sleep seems to get bigger and in some cases smaller throughout the rest of the night. Also, when you go from the gray all the way to the light blue, that counts as one sleep cycle. The average sleep cycle is approximately 90 minutes. And as you can tell here, the average individual has 5 of those sleep cycles. Those numbers are going to be important. So I want you to remember that the average sleep cycle is 90 minutes. The average person has 5 of these cycles. So what are the stages? The really important stages for everybody here is stages 3 and 4. These are the physically restorative sleep. This represents about 20–25% of the total sleep across the night. And this is the wake up and feel great sleep. This is very physically restorative. This is where your blood pressure drops, your respiration slows, and something called growth hormone is emitted. Now, growth hormone is important because it's kind of the cellular repair that goes on throughout the body, right? So when you look at it, it's kind of like thinking about like bringing your car into the body shop and having the dents and the scratches and the dings pulled out of it, that kind of thing. That's what growth hormone does, but it only occurs during stage 3–4 sleep, which again is mostly in the first third of the night. This again is the physically restorative sleep, and this is definitely one of the things that a lot of poker players don't get a lot of because they shorten their total sleep time, and it's hard for them to get enough stage 3–4 sleep to feel refreshed the next day. Next stage of sleep that's really important is REM sleep. That's not the band from Athens. That is rapid eye movement sleep. Rapid eye movement sleep, also known as dream sleep, is very, very important. Represents about 25% of the total sleep time. This is your mentally restorative sleep. So remember, stage 3–4 is physical restoration. Stage REM is mental restoration. This is actually where you move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. This is critical for learning and understanding and decision-making. And so without REM sleep, this is where we see people making the same mistakes over and over. This is where bad decision-making comes in. All of these things. And of course, when somebody is sleep deprived, and we'll talk about what that means in a second, that's when all the problems have a tendency to occur. Now, what's fascinating during REM sleep in particular is your muscles become relaxed. They actually become so relaxed that you become paralyzed and you can't move. Most people don't realize that, but this is a mechanism inside the brain so that you don't act out your dreams. Believe it or not, there are people out there where this mechanism doesn't work and they act out their dreams. It's called REM behavior disorder. It's a little bit different than sleepwalking or sleep talking because they actually fully act out their dreams. Now, I'm going to digress for a second and tell you a story about a patient that I have who's pretty interesting. He has REM behavior disorder. So I come from a town right outside of Atlanta, Georgia called Sandy Springs. And it's a decent sized hunting community. And I don't know if anybody out there is a hunter, but if you shoot a doe and you don't kill it, you have to either slit its throat or crack its neck. It's the most humane thing to do. So this gentleman was having a dream of hunting, and he was going over to crack the deer's neck, and he woke up and his wife's head was there. You can't make this stuff up, guys. It was unbelievable. She's screaming her head off, don't kill me, all this kind of stuff. So this can be dangerous. The good news is that they're still married. The good news is he didn't kill her, and we were able to fix it all with one medication. Interestingly, REM sleep behavior disorder is actually a precursor for Parkinson's syndrome. So in about 30–35% of the cases we see in REM behavior disorder, they eventually develop Parkinson's. So sometimes we can get people a little bit further down the treatment path, which is really important. we actually see an increased rate of respiration, blood pressure, pulse, and temperature during REM sleep. Believe it or not, if you were looking at somebody's brain waves during REM sleep and during wake, you almost can't tell them apart. We think that dreaming occurs because of an increase in this brain activity. So as your brain takes pieces of information and moves it from the short-term memory to the long-term memory, it actually creates an organizational substructure in your head for memory for retrieval. So to be able to retrieve a piece of information, information has to be connected to other pieces of information, like a chain would be. And we think that the connecting process actually is what dreaming is. So it's very interesting to see. This is very new research, and certainly something to be aware of. Most of the REM sleep does happen in the last third of the night. And so if somebody has to wake up early, as an example, they might cut out their last sleep cycle, which would have the largest amount of REM sleep, again, depending upon them and their cycle time. So what I thought I would do is give people what I call sleep hacks. So first one is, how do you hack your bedtime? What does that actually mean? And so I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to move my little thing over here. That should make it a little bit easier. So first of all, we all have what is called a socially determined wake-up time. In our house, it's around 6:30 in the morning because I have to get my kids up to be able to go to school. So I got to get up at 6:30 whether I want to or not. That's probably what's going to happen in my house. Now remember, when we talked about the second slide, we looked at the cycles of sleep and the number of cycles. So if you remember, 90-minute cycles, 5 of those. So 5 times 90 is 450. Divided by 60 is 7.5 or 7.5 hours. So step number 1 is, remember, 8 hours is a myth. Okay, lots of people don't need 8 hours of sleep. We can tell just by doing the average math that 7.5 hours appears to be a number that makes a lot of sense, maybe even as little as 7. I can tell you that as an adult, me personally, I don't sleep more than 6.5 hours a night, period. I never have. As an adult, I've always slept about 6.5 hours a night, sometimes 7 if I'm not feeling so great. So again, this is an experiment that you can determine. So you take your socially determined wake-up time, you subtract 7.5 hours, and this now becomes your new optimal bedtime, right? So let's take the example that I used of myself. So I get up at 6:30, I subtract 7.5 hours, and so my bedtime should be 11 p.m. Now, I tried this experiment, and it failed. It failed miserably, actually. I went to bed at 11, woke up at 5:30. I don't like mornings at all. 5:30 was not the time that I wanted to be out of bed. So I decided to try it again. Went to bed at 11, again, woke up at 5:30. What I realized is that my sleep cycle is probably not 90 minutes long. The good news is I work in a sleep lab, so I was able to measure my sleep cycle. It turns out it's about 78 minutes. So 5 of those actually put me at about 6.5 hours of sleep. And so by changing my bedtime to midnight and then realizing that I only need 6.5 hours, getting up at 6:30 very regularly actually condenses my sleep. It turns out that the more consistently you wake up, even more so than go to bed, but the more consistently you wake up at the same time, which includes weekends, guys and gals, the less sleep your body needs, because you become more efficient at sleeping. So it's pretty interesting when you start to look at some of that stuff. Now, when you're thinking about bedtime, the first thing you also got to think about is your bedroom. Most people don't think of sleep like this, but I believe that sleep is a performance activity. So I'm a runner. And if you're a runner, you know that you can run in a race with flip-flops and torn shorts and torn t-shirt with a big boombox on your arm, but your time's not going to be so good, right? However, if you got your Asics on and your dry fit wear and your good tunes on, you will actually perform better. The same holds true with sleep. If you have the right sleep equipment, you will sleep better, and certainly not have as many distractions as some people have. So when I think of sleep, what I like to think of it as in terms of the 5 senses, right? So sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. So let's go through a couple of those so you can see where they can be effective of your sleep, especially in your bedroom. So I've got here on this slide light. So remember something is that light is the #1 thing to affect your sleep. Light affects the biological clock and melatonin production and release. Light is medicine. Just like there's junk food, there's also junk light out there. And I believe that light can be transformative in a person's sleep. Here's the science behind it. It turns out is when light goes into your eye and hits the optic nerve, it sends a signal to your brain to turn off your melatonin faucet in your head. This is specific to blue light, or the wavelength of light that goes from about 460 nanometers to about 480 nanometers. So this is very, very consistent. The data is very, very clear. Light affects your ability to sleep, which is why we want less light at night and more light in the morning. So a couple things you can do: change your bulbs to 40 watts by your bedside table, install night lights on your way to the bathroom. If you like to read at night, use a book light, not a bedside table light. And there are also products out there that are pretty amazing. So this is a company, Lighting Science Group, and full transparency, I'm on their advisory board. I like their products so much, I wanted to join the company. This company does some pretty amazing things when it comes to light. This bulb that I've featured here actually has a filter on it. It looks like it's amber colored, but it's actually not. It has a filter on it, and it filters out the blue light. So I have these in my kids' bedrooms, unbeknownst to my children. So that way it doesn't affect their ability to sleep at night. I have the opposite kind of lights. They also have awake and alert lighting that can be used in their bathrooms in the morning. So I do this in my bedroom as well. I've got the bulbs by my bedside that don't block blue light, and I've got in the bathroom, I've got the extra blue light and awake and alert. Another thing you'll notice here are these are blue blocker glasses. So yeah, from back in the 70s when they used to come out with blue blockers, believe it or not, the technology has changed pretty dramatically, and there are many different types. This is a company called, looks like True Dark. But there are several companies out there, Swanwick, True Dark, there's several out there. These are really interesting and can be used quite well. I actually use these, my kids use these because they get eye strain from using a computer all day long. And so by utilizing these glasses at night, it lowers their eye strain, but it also blocks the blue light. I've personally used these True Dark ones, the red ones on the left. I use them on airplanes. They look a little goofy, but you put them on, they literally block out every bit of blue light, and they are fantastic for long haul flights, like if you're going to Europe or things like that. So again, kind of some interesting products and technology when it comes to light, but whatever you can do to reduce the amount of light in your room, the better. Blackout curtains, what have you. Now, don't go crazy and worry about the little blue light on the cable box. That's not going to have an effect. I'm talking about much bigger sources of light. Next has to do with sound, right? And so I am the only sleep doctor in the universe that says it's okay to sleep with the television on. That's right, you heard it here. It is okay to sleep with the television on. I have lots of patients who report to me that, in fact, it's the only way they can settle down their brain. Most people find that at some time in their life, they can't turn off their brain in order to get them to fall asleep. And sometimes television can be a nice distraction. And so again, I've got no problems if you want to fall asleep with the TV on. That's not an issue at all. Just set the timer. 95% of televisions have a TV timer associated with them. So on many cases, I'm talking to people about that. Never use the snooze button if you possibly can help it. So one of the things that I've talked about with a lot of people is the idea of the snooze button. So it turns out that the snooze button is between 7 and 9 minutes long. And in many cases, all it does is give you light, crappy sleep. Your body can't get back into deep sleep in 7 to 9 minutes. So hitting the snooze button is never, ever helpful. All you're doing basically is giving yourself light, crappy sleep. If you are going to use earplugs because you've got a noisy bed partner or a dog sleeping next to you that snores or what have you, considering earplugs is a good idea, you want to get them noise level rated. That's what that NLR means, noise level rated at 32 or below. This means it will block out approximately 32 decibels, and it won't block out the smoke alarm. When you get much higher than 32, then you might not be able to hear the smoke alarm, which could be a safety hazard. I love sound machines. I currently work with iHome. You may have heard of them. They do a lot of alarm clocks and things to plug your phone into. They are a great company that has made a sound therapy machine available. I think it's like at Bed Bath & Beyond or wherever. And great thing to have by the bedside. It's got ocean sounds in it, relaxation exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, you name it. Now, there are plenty of apps out there that you can download and get. Relaxation audios, things like that. I personally like the iHome one because I helped develop it, and I work with that company. It's been very interesting understanding the science and kind of getting there with them. But these are all things that you can consider, again, to create a better sound environment for sleep. Next is touch. So there's lots of things that we could talk about here: mattress, pillows, sheets, you name it. What I'm going to do is teach people a little bit about how to pick the best mattress. So it turns out that the mattress business has got a tremendous amount of margin in it. So $1,000 bed is probably close to $500 worth of profit for the retailer. That being said, most mattresses are built for price, not for people. So here's what really happens: is a retail store like one of those sleep shops that you see when you're driving around will turn to a manufacturer and say, I want a bed at a price point of $1,000. And so here's how that goes: is it's $1,000 price point. You take away 50% for retailer margin, so you're left with $500. You take away 10% for manufacturer margin, which takes away $50, and you're left with $450. That's then split into $225 for raw materials, $225 for labor, and you just configure it as many different ways as you possibly can. That's how mattresses are actually built. So when you're going into a mattress store with a 50% profit margin there, you really need to know what you're getting, because in many cases, the quality of the materials might not be so great. So here's my kind of 7 steps to picking a mattress, because it's not fun. You walk into a mattress store, there's 30 fuzzy rectangles. They all look identical. You lie on a couple of them. You say, how much do I want to spend? And that's how you do it. There's much, much, much better way of doing this. First of all, you want to show up at the end of the day. This is the time closest to bedtime. Also, your body is kind of ready to be lying down. You want to wear socks, sweatpants, and bring your own pillow. Yep, you're basically going to be wearing your bed clothes to try out beds. You want to have identified 3 to 5 beds you're interested in prior to getting to the store. There's spring beds, there's memory foam, there's latex, there's air. There's lots of different beds. Air beds, by the way, are the select comfort beds where they have air baffles that kind of expand and contract as you need them throughout the night. You want to try beds from each one of these categories to really kind of get a feel for what you like. So what you want to do is you lie down in your starting sleep position with your pillow, take off your shoes. So you have your feet in socks, you're in sweatpants, you've got your pillow, and you are snuggled in to get ready for bed. You want to lie there for a good 5 to 7 minutes. Set a timer on your phone if that's what you want to do, and close your eyes. When the timer goes off, switch positions. Go to another position for another 7 minutes or so. And then when you wake up from that, after the timer goes off, you want to rate that bed from 1 to 10. Do not show it to your bed partner. Move to the next bed, and then you compare ratings with your bed partner at the end of the experiment. Be sure to tell the salesperson exactly which beds you want to try, have them point them out to you in the store, and then ask them to go and sit at their desk and leave you alone while you test everything out. This is the way I found that's most successful to being able to find the right mattress for you. Remember, you do get what you pay for, right? I wouldn't personally spend less than about somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 on a bed. And in some rare cases, I might go as high as $300 to $3,500 for a bed. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some luxury beds out there that are amazing. But the truth of the matter is that you don't have to spend a tremendous amount of money to get a really good, solid product that's good for sleep. And people always ask all the time, how often should I be replacing my mattress? Your body will tell you when to replace your mattress. I wish there was like a turkey timer that just popped on the end that said, okay, bed is no longer good for you. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So one of the things that's important is to listen to your body. And if you're waking up with aches and pains a couple times a week, you're stiff or you're sore, things like that, and it hadn't come from a recent workout, then there's a very high likelihood that you need a new bed. Let's talk about taste. So a lot of people say, what could food possibly have to do with my sleep? Well, it turns out there's quite a bit. So first of all, caffeine. You really want to avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in my talk, but most people don't know, but caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. 6 and 8 hours, guys. So what that means is that if you stop drinking around 2 p.m., about 10 o'clock is when it should, at least half of it should be out of your system, making it more easier to fall asleep. Especially if you're at a tournament and you're playing late into the evening, you need to be really careful about your caffeine consumption. Small doses are really where it's going to be better than large dosages, and you need to understand the timing to be able to fall asleep at the end of that day. As far as alcohol is concerned, there's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but alcohol, it takes the average human being approximately 1 hour to digest one alcoholic beverage. So if you have a couple of beers with dinner and you stop dinner at 8, roughly all of the alcohol should be out of your system by about 10 o'clock. That's perfect in terms of giving yourself a little bit of leeway. I also recommend people use my technique called a glass for a glass. So for every glass of alcoholic beverage, you have 1 glass of water. Alcohol, the reason that people get a hangover, half the reason is because you don't get stage 3, 4 sleep. Remember, that's the physically restorative sleep. The other half is dehydration. Alcohol is a diuretic. Once you break the seal and you kind of start going to the bathroom, you're going to start peeing on a fairly regular basis. So you need to be pretty careful about that, but you need to stay hydrated most importantly. And food definitely can have an effect on your sleep. Now, lots of people ask me about turkey, right? They say, oh, I heard that, you know, after Thanksgiving, everybody gets tired because you have turkey, or if you eat a turkey sandwich, it's going to be helpful. You would have to eat a 26-pound turkey, the whole thing, in order to get enough tryptophan to actually make it worth your while. And that's the substance in turkey that we know makes people feel sleepy. Also, by the way, tryptophan doesn't work particularly well in the presence of protein. So even in your best day of eating an entire turkey, it's still not going to be helpful. The reason, by the way, people are so exhausted after Thanksgiving, it's because usually their in-laws have shown up. That's driving them crazy and is super stressful, or they've been prepping for the meal for quite a long period of time. Another question people ask me about is warm milk. They say, is it okay to drink warm milk at night? It's fine, but the truth of the matter is you'd have to drink 1.5 gallons of warm milk to get enough tryptophan to actually make it worth your while. Again, that sounds pretty disgusting. The reason that warm milk works is not because of the milk. It's because of whoever was giving you the milk. They had a positive influence on your life. They made you feel calm. They made you feel relaxed. That will oftentimes help you be able to fall asleep. Smell is the final sense that we're talking about today. Does aromatherapy really work? Believe it or not, it does. There's been at least 2 double-blind placebo-controlled studies looking at aromatherapy. This helps people fall asleep faster. It gives them greater satisfaction with their sleep, and they report not waking up as much. But I have this slide in here in particular to remind me to let everybody know that aromatherapy, while it works, you should not be using a candle for aromatherapy for sleep. Remember, fire and sleep do not mix, and we don't want you to fall asleep with a lit flame. So be very, very careful when you're using aromatherapy, but yes, there is data to show that it does work. Now I want to get into an area. So we've talked about bedtimes and how to figure out what your proper bedtime is. We've talked about your bedroom environment to understand more about how we can tweak that and make it better for sleep. Let's talk about something that I like to call nap hacking. So I work with NASA, and we learned that there are actually several different types of naps depending upon what time of day you take them. So a nap with more stage 2 sleep appears to increase alertness and motor skills. A nap with more stage 3, 4 sleep improves memory and clears your mind, and a nap with more REM sleep inspires creativity and heightens perceptions. So this is all interesting information, but Michael, how do I know how to get a nap with stage 2 or a nap with stage 3 or a nap with REM? It all depends upon when you nap. So if we look across the scale here, what we can see is a REM nap would occur early in the morning, like at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, while I can't say that I know a lot of poker players that are early birds, if you are somebody that wakes up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, taking a nap at 9 might not be such a bad idea. Remember, naps can be any length of time, but there's certain naps that if you take it too long, you feel worse than when you went to bed. I personally would prefer people taking a 20 to 25-minute nap. So if you're trying to be more creative and get a REM nap in, then 9 a.m. for 25 minutes makes a lot of sense. If you're looking for stage 3, 4, which again inspires memory and things of that nature, then you're looking at a later afternoon nap, probably in the 3 to 5 range in the later part of the evening. Not too close to bedtime, remember, because we don't want to decrease that sleep drive. The perfect blend of REM and stage 3, 4 nap turns out to be between 1 and 3 in the afternoon. Now, this shouldn't be a big surprise. So if any of you have ever traveled to Latin America, we know that there is a time period there where they are known for napping called the siesta. So it turns out siestas are very, very important and can be very, very helpful for most people. So when you start to look at something like this, the perfect time for napping is between 1 and 3 in the afternoon. This actually is because of biology. It turns out that there's a small dip in your core body temperature between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, which is why most people get sleepy around then. So for a lot of my patients, I'm teaching them that that might be a great time for them to take a 25-minute nap. This would allow for them to get enough stage 2 to increase their level of alertness. And so as an example, if you've got a break in a tournament, this might be a perfect time to put on some sunglasses, put on your earbuds, close your eyes for 15 minutes, and then have an alarm set to wake you up. Even a 15-minute nap can be very alerting, be very, very helpful for your alertness levels and ability to concentrate and play poker. Now, I'm going to give you a super duper napping hack that I use. It's very, very effective. Do not, I repeat, do not use it every single day, but this is something that I think you'll find pretty fascinating. I call it the nap a latte. So you take a 6-ounce cup of drip coffee. The reason I pick drip coffee is because it is the highest caffeinated coffee, more so than espresso and cappuccino. Throw 3 ice cubes in it and drink the whole thing as quickly as you can. Close your eyes immediately and take a 25-minute nap. What this does is the nap actually eats through the adenosine in your brain so that you're not as sleepy. The caffeine comes in and it fits perfectly into that receptor site. Remember, I told you they're only off by 1 molecule. And when the caffeine kicks in after you wake up, which is approximately 25 minutes later, you are good for 4 hours guaranteed. I have lots of people, CEOs, who use this on airplanes, people who do it before meetings. I have professional athletes who do it in between matches. It can be highly, highly effective. This is a great technique for somebody to use, especially if you're in the late stages of a poker tournament and it's getting late and you are feeling yourself becoming exhausted. Remember, if you do this late in the evening, it is going to have effect on your ability to fall asleep at night. So you may want to reduce the caffeine or have a half caffeinated, a half decaf cup of coffee, which might last about 2 hours in terms of its effectiveness. So definitely something to think about here and something I use quite a bit. Now I'm going to give you sleep tips that you can use right now, starting today, that will help you improve your overall levels of sleep. So here are 8 effective tips for sleep during the evening. So step 1 is limiting alcohol approximately 3 hours before bed. As I said before, there's a big difference between going to sleep and passing out. And so one of the things we want to do is give our body the opportunity to digest. And of course, giving yourself 3 hours after your last drink before you go to bed is going to be one of the best ways to do something like that. For coffee, I recommend that your first cup be 90 minutes after you wake up. So most people don't realize this, but caffeine is actually a diuretic. It makes you pee and it makes you dehydrated. Also, most people don't know that while we're sleeping, in our breath, we actually breathe out the humidity in our breath. We breathe out almost a full liter of water each day, or each evening rather. And so we wake up dehydrated. This is why our lips are chapped and things like that. So that being said, adding a diuretic as the first liquid that crosses your lips in the morning to an already dehydrated body is never a good idea. What you really need is about 16 ounces of water. I do a protein shake every single morning. That's about 16, 18 ounces. So I get my water and I get my protein, which fuels my brain. Remember something, by the way, for folks out there, carbohydrates slow your brain down. Carbohydrates actually make you feel sleepy. In many cases, I give people snacks that they can have before bed that can help them with falling asleep. But if you're in a tournament and you're eating carbohydrates, you are almost guaranteed to feel tired. Or in a late night session, you're almost guaranteed to feel tired. So keeping on a very high protein, almost ketogenic diet is going to be one of the best things that you can do. Again, waiting for your first cup of coffee for 90 minutes after you wake up will be much more helpful because you need your body to rehydrate first. Before bed, remember that sleep is not an on-off switch. You can't just go in and boom, fall asleep. It's really more like pulling your foot slowly off the gas and putting your foot on the brake. There's a process that needs to occur, and it should take you 15 or 20 minutes to wind down before bed. That being said, I like people to have about an hour before bed. So let's say that you have a late night session and you're gonna go into bed around 1 o'clock. If you can, starting at around 12, 12:30, break the hour up if you're going to start at 12 into 3 20-minute segments. If you've only got a half an hour, then 3 10-minute segments. The first segment should be used for stuff you just got to do before the next day. In our house, it's getting the kids' backpacks together, finding shoes, that kind of stuff. Then the next segment is used for sleep hygiene. So good teeth brush, wash your face, maybe take an evening shower, something like that. Because when you're in a poker room for a long period of time, it's certainly nice to get all of that kind of guck off of you. And by the way, hot showers have actually been shown, hot showers, primarily hot baths have been shown to be helpful with sleep at night, especially if you add a little lavender and a little Epsom salt or some magnesium. It can be very, very sleep inducing. And then 10 minutes, or the last segment rather, for some level of meditation, relaxation, prayer, read scripture, whatever it is that calms you down. That's the thing that you want to do. Do not be playing hands in your head. Do not be thinking about what your next strategic move is. This is a time for removal from your job, removal from your stress, and being able to get some quality time on your own. Personally, I keep a notepad by my bedside table because in the middle of the night, if I come up with an idea or as I'm falling asleep, one of the best things that I can do is write it down quickly and get it out of my head. For a long period of time, if I got what I thought was an amazing idea, oftentimes I would think about it, think about it, think about it. And what does that do? That brings up all this autonomic arousal, makes it very difficult to fall asleep. So this is a way to kind of get that out of your head. You can, sketch on it and write about it the next day. Remember, select a bedtime and stick to it. Most importantly is your wake up time. But a bedtime is equally as important. I get it. You might want to go out. You might be having a long session. Something like that might keep you from going to bed. But your wake up time is the anchor. It is critical. So if you're going to wake up every morning at, let's say, 8 o'clock, then I don't care if you were playing until 7 o'clock. You got to get out of bed at 8. It's really, really important for your sleep cycle to be as consistent as possible. Primarily the wake up time, but also the bedtime. I told you that TV is okay, but iPads are not so great. And I'm not picking on Apple. Any tablet, any laptop, or any phone before bed isn't good. Number one, the blue light is literally in your face. When your TV is across the room, I don't think that's that big of a deal. But when you've got blue light within 18 to 24 inches of your eyeballs, remember, it turns off the melatonin faucet. So we really don't want that there. There was a new study that just came out 2 weeks ago that showed that the night shift mode in the Apple iPhone does not work at all. It does not suppress melatonin at all. All it does is lower the brightness. It doesn't change the frequency. There's a difference between the brightness of the light and the frequency of the light that's being emitted. So remember, nothing close to the face. Television is okay. And finally, stay cool in bed. There's lots of data to now show that the cooler it is, the easier it is to sleep through the night. Also, you need to know what's called your chronotype. Now, many of you may know that I have a recent book out called The Power of When, and what it describes is something called chronotypes. Now, you may not have heard of the word chronotypes before, but you probably have heard of people being called an early bird or a night owl. So, in fact, those are chronotypes. I discovered that there aren't 2, there's actually 4, and I'm going to go through them with you because you might be surprised. Now, that being said, if you haven't had the opportunity yet, if you go to www.thepowerofwhenquiz.com, then you can it's free. You just sign up for my email. It's perfectly free, and you will learn what your chronotype is. Remember, not all humans lead the same circadian life. As I talked about before, about 15 to 20% of people are night owls, about 15 to 20% of people are early birds. So I've discovered that there are 4 different chronotypes. So I've replaced them with animals as opposed to birds. So the early birds are now what I call the lions. They make up about 15% of the population. These are early morning optimists with pretty decent sleep drive. And in fact, these people have a tendency to be my go-getters, my leaders, my COOs. To be very honest with you, most of my poker players do not fall into this category. These are the people that prioritize health and fitness, and they make a plan and stick to it. They start on step 1 and go to step 2 and go to step 3 and go to step 4. They like to go in order. They're kind of almost type A personality and militant about things. However, they do go to bed early because they wake up so early. These guys and gals wake up about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Most poker players are not in this category because most poker is played in the evening and most poker players are staying up much later than this. While this is a genetic situation, you can actually go to 23andMe and test your genes on it. It is not something that I've found, at least in most poker players. Bears are the middle ground. These make up about 55% of the population. These are my solar sleepers with the healthy sleep drive. They really are the glue for society. They get stuff done. They are oftentimes extroverted and very open-minded. If you were at a poker table with a bear, they would be fairly talkative. They would be making friends with people at the table, quite gregarious, buying drinks, that kind of fun stuff. Most of society, believe it or not, is built around a bear's schedule, and a lot of poker players are definitely bears. Wolves, which is what I am, make up about 15% of the population. And these are late night people. So I have always been a late night person ever since I was very young. We are creative and sort of out of the box thinkers. We like novelty, and we can be risk takers. You can see how many poker players would fall into this category. Not all, but many. We don't like to follow patterns, but we like to make things look amazing. So these are people who don't go from step 1 to step 2. They go from step 1 to step 12 to step 7 to step 14 and that kind of thing. Sometimes they can be a little bit socially introverted. They're not necessarily the life of the party. They like to hang back, come in late, and sort of check things out. They are deeply loyal friends, though. The final category are what are called my dolphins. These make up about 10% of the population, and I'll be honest with you, these are my problem children. These are the people who often have erratic sleep schedules, very short sleep drive, craving longer bouts of sleep. They may be self-diagnosed as insomniacs. Although they are highly intelligent, they tend to be a little obsessive compulsive, and are not ever able to finish a project. It's never quite done in their minds. They're often fast-talking, well-read, and a lot of fun. But these are the ones that the book was primarily written for, and they do a lot of good work when they reschedule themselves and can figure things out. Now, why on earth would you care about having or understanding your chronotype? So there's a couple of different reasons why it might be valuable. So number one, if we know where what our chronotype is, we also actually know that hormones inside our body work on a very regular schedule. We know that melatonin goes up and down at a regular schedule, cortisol goes up and down at a regular schedule, but it's all based on chronotype. So if you're a lion, all this stuff happens starting around 5:30 in the morning. But if you're a wolf, all this stuff happens starting around 8:30 in the morning. So there's a big time gap there. So if we know that the timing of hormones is based on chronotype, and if we know that which hormones are used in specific activities like running or brainstorming or things like that, we can just change our schedule to fit our natural rhythms. It's really actually very simple. So what I thought I would do is focus in a little bit on health in these 4 categories to teach you a little bit more about chronotypes. So when we're talking about caffeine here, things to think about are your cortisol rhythm and your metabolic rhythm. We've already talked a little bit about metabolic rhythm in that caffeine, it takes about 6 to 8 hours to get it out of your system or metabolized. But what most people don't know is in order to wake up, your body increases something called cortisol and something called adrenaline to, boom, wake you up in the morning. This is the reason why coffee is not great for you first thing in the morning, primarily because cortisol is alive and well in your brain. Adding caffeine to do this doesn't actually wake you up. All it does is give you the jitters. It's better to wait about 90 minutes when that that cortisol level is naturally going down, to then have some caffeine, which will help lift that cortisol level back to where you want it to be. So what I've done is I created a schedule here, and this is being recorded. You can stop it, pause it, whatever you need to do. Once you've identified your chronotype, this actually will give you a schedule as to when are the best times for the different chronotypes to actually have a cup of coffee. Now, again, this is all detailed in the book, The Power of When. You can get it at Amazon and that kind of stuff. And we'll put some links in here later for people to be able to purchase the book. But the book actually has 50 different activities, everything from when to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, run a mile, ask your boss for a raise, drink your coffee, all of those things. But again, this is very different for different people. And as you can see, lions are drinking coffee earlier in the day, whereas wolves are drinking coffee much later in the day. As I told you before, I'm a runner. So people often ask me, is there a right time to run? So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to burn fat, then a fasting workout within 30 minutes of waking up is a great idea. Now, again, for you wolves out there like me, there's nothing worse than thinking about waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go for a run or a workout or what have you. I am just not that guy. It also turns out that bears don't like waking up early either. But if you're trying to do performance, if you're trying to get your best time, then these are the times that work the best because your adrenaline is naturally flowing at these times depending upon your chronotype. Lions, it's best in the late morning, bears in the afternoon, wolves in the evening, and dolphins, believe it or not, best in the morning. For dolphins in particular, going for a run or doing some type of cardio can be very effective at reducing their stress. Now, I will tell you the caveat here is bears, who again make up 55% of the population, if they don't exercise in the morning, they're just not going to do it. So I tell people, even though from a performance standpoint, it's best to exercise in the afternoon, the likelihood is you're probably going to exercise in the morning. Alcohol turns out to be a topic of interesting conversation for 3 separate reasons. One is your tolerance. Second is when does your body like to have alcohol? And then third happens to be dealing with a hangover. So it turns out that your body produces an enzyme in the liver called alcohol dehydrogenase. This is the thing that actually breaks down the toxins in alcohol and gets them through your liver and gets them out of your body. It turns out that your body does not make alcohol dehydrogenase in the early morning hours, rather in the late afternoon hours. So if you drink something like, let's say you go out to brunch and you have a mimosa or Bloody Mary for Mother's Day or Kentucky Derby or whatever, you will catch a buzz earlier in the day and with much less alcohol, and it will stay with you because, again, your body's not producing this alcohol dehydrogenase. It turns out that it has a tendency to produce it somewhere between 4 and 6 in the evenings, which is a perfect time for happy hour. So while bartenders may not know about alcohol dehydrogenase, most people know that when you get people into your bar by feeding them salty and spicy food at very low prices, they will drink. And during that period of time, because they have alcohol dehydrogenase, they can actually drink more. So this was, we could call it a conspiracy theory, but I think it worked. In that lots and lots of people are drinking during the happy hour, and biologically this actually makes a lot of sense. When we're talking about a hangover, there's a lot of things to think about, but first of all, let's talk about strategic drinking. Based on your chronotype, these are the times when you have the highest level of alcohol dehydrogenase, your body can drink the most alcohol and effectively metabolize it. So you can see the times here. Again, this is all available in the book, but I also created hangover hacks. So it turns out, again, a glass for a glass turns out to be a great technique, drinking 1 glass of water for each beverage. Believe it or not, coconut water before bed. I've seen 2 studies that there's something in coconut water that's very, very helpful for a hangover. You want to stop drinking roughly 3 hours before bed. Remember the whole 1 hour per alcoholic beverage idea. Also, taking magnesium and vitamin B in the morning can be very, very helpful. Alcohol depletes your body of many things, but 2 of the big ones are magnesium and vitamin B. And of course, time is always going to be on your side. Now, I've talked a lot about what to do in your bedroom. I've given you bedtimes, things like that, but I can also give you some bedtimes based on your chronotype. So here's what's interesting is lions and bears have 5 cycles, but what you'll notice here is that dolphins and wolves only have 4 cycles. All right, so here again, we're looking at a very different based on your chronotype amount of sleep. Again, I'm a wolf and I sleep about 6.5 hours, and you can see to the right that it makes sense. So 90-minute cycle times 4 cycles is 360 minutes. I add 40 minutes to fall asleep because it takes dolphins and wolves a little bit longer to fall asleep. That gives me 400 minutes, or about little over 6.5 hours. Lions and bears have 5 cycles. It takes them less time to sleep. So overall, they get about 470 minutes, and that's when they feel refreshed. So remember my bedtime hack before, add this piece to it in terms of changing the number of cycles, and you'll find it works out quite well. I've laid these out for people in this easy to read matrix for wake up times as well as bedtimes, and hopefully this will be helpful for folks out there as well. Remember, again, it's all in the book, and this is all being taped. So people ask me all the time, can you actually hack your chronotype? You can, but you need to use light, caffeine, and melatonin. The same way that you would be affecting jet lag is how you would change your chronotype. But it's really hard to move one. If you're a bear, you might try to become a lion. A wolf might become a bear, but a wolf is never going to become a lion. And a lion is never going to be able to do the shift work, right? So thinking about your chronotype, you really are going to have a tendency to be able to move one chronotype if you're lucky. How do you make yourself a morning person? So first of all, go to bed at the right time for you every night, including weekends. This is a common question that I get. Never hit the snooze button. Remember, 7 to 9 minutes, only going to give you crappy sleep. Get direct sunlight for 10 minutes before anything else. Everybody, when they wake up, grab that bottle of water, drinking that water, go over to the window and get some sun. It is healthy for you. It produces vitamin D, and it resets your circadian rhythm every single morning. I already talked about the water. Let there be light, as we know, but also music. Music can be very stimulating, help wake you up in the morning. If you can, exercising your body and mind every morning. A quick meditation in the morning to keep yourself present, and then if you can, exercise daily. It is the easiest way to improve the quality of your sleep. And also I tell people take a cool, not cold shower. A cool shower actually shunts blood to the trunk and helps make you more alert. So if you haven't gotten a lot of sleep the night before and you're going in for a big session or a big tournament, taking a cool shower can be very alerting. Stay away from warm beverages, stay away from carbohydrates, because those will make you, both will make you sleepy. And then start your day with a high protein, high, good fat breakfast. This will be very, very helpful for you in the long run as far as brain food or energy food. So with that, I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to watch my presentation here. And I'm going to come back online here. People can see me. Oh, there's Elliot.
Hey, I'm glad you guys can see me. I've hit the wrong button. I can't see myself. So
Oh dear. I can see you and I can't see me.
That's all good. Well, thank you so much. Just really amazing information there, and I'm sure everyone's got a ton from it, especially the chronotypes. So I've realized I'm a lion.
That's correct, Elliot. If you're a lion, you're in trouble, brother. If you're going to try to play poker at night.
Yeah, I don't play a ton, so I'm good.
There you go.
Right, we've got quite a few questions. I'm going to quickly blast through some ones. Let us know on time.
No problem. Yeah, let's go for 4 or 5 questions, and then the ones that don't get answered, if you email them to me, I can send you email answers. Or like we said before, we could always do a Facebook Live in a week or two after people have had a chance to send in their questions, and then we can answer them then.
Perfect. So guys, thanks for all your questions. We'll do it that way. I'll ask a few questions. What I'll do is I'll skim through and make sure we're not doubling up on the information.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we'll arrange another one and save the other questions that have come up.
Certainly.
So the first question I think we should go for is something that's quite interesting. It's come up a lot in my work. People trying polyphasic sleep. I've personally seen poker players fail at this terribly, and it costs them a lot of money. What are your thoughts on it as someone who's actually within the sleep industry? As I say, I've been pretty negative, but what are your thoughts there?
So it's funny that you bring that up, Elliot, because the slides that I removed from the presentation today were the polyphasic sleep slides. So it's funny because so many people are interested in it. So polyphasic sleep is where you sleep for example, 3 hours. This is the worst case scenario. You sleep for a core 3 hours, and then you have 3 20 to 30-minute naps each day at very particular times. There's a 2-nap method. There's a 1-nap method. Here's the problem with polyphasic sleep is you cannot deviate on the times. The times are exact. You must be, and it must also line up with your chronotype, which can be difficult. That's number one. Number two, if a person has any proclivity for depression, it will pop in about 3 weeks of following one of these schedules. So people get very, very depressed because, quite frankly, they get very, very lonely. They're up in the middle of the night. There's not much for them to do, not people for them to talk to. And so the depression really sinks in, the loneliness factor sinks in, and the social factor sinks in. If you're doing a 3-hour core at night and you have very specific times for napping, you might not be able to go to dinner and a movie or play a full tournament or something like that because, again, the napping schedule. Most people crash and burn on a polyphasic sleep schedule. I've only seen 2 people actually be able to do it and do it well for extended periods of time of longer than about 2.5, 3 months. Again, when you're looking at performance decrements, they're absolutely there. When you're looking at decision-making problems, it's definitely an issue. People just aren't as alert on polyphasic sleep. And if there's one thing you got to be in poker, it's alert.
Hey, I'm glad we're on the same page there, because as I say, every time I've seen someone try it, it's been a disaster.
Yes.
So good to hear that. Yeah, I wasn't wrong on that one. A question looks like it's come up a few times. Mm-hmm. People saying that they need an awful lot more sleep, so 10 to 11 hours of sleep. A few people have mentioned this in the questions. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something they should be trying to take control of? Is this just something that's natural for certain people?
So it's interesting. So both. So first of all, when somebody tells me that they need 10 hours of sleep, the very first thing I become suspect of is the quality of the sleep that they are getting. The average human needs somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. If you need more than 9 hours of sleep, then I wonder, it's not a quantity issue, it could be a quality issue for you. So that could mean that you've got a lot of caffeine on board, that could mean there's alcohol on board, but something affecting the quality of your sleep. It could be a sleep disorder like sleep apnea, narcolepsy, something along those lines. So the first thing I want to know is, what is the quality of your sleep? Now, that being said, there are some people out there who are long sleepers, people who need 9 hours of sleep, 10 hours of sleep. Once you go past 10 hours of sleep, you're definitely in the realm of pathology. Again, very, very few people need about 10 hours of sleep. So if you're needing 10, 11, 12 hours of sleep, you definitely want to talk with your doctor or talk with somebody like me, and we will help find you the resources to figure out if you've got a sleep disorder or not.
Okay, and I mean, people are asking how they find out about their sleep cycles,
Uh-huh.
individual plans and things. How can people work with you if they're interested in talking to you?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, they can send an email to you, Elliot, or to Ryan, and we're happy to give you my email and contact information. You can contact me on my website, say that you saw me here, and we can start working together. But my website is thesleepdoctor.com. And I work with people all the time. I am accepting new patients. And I work with people all the time. I work with a lot of CEOs. I work with a lot of celebrities, people who have super crazy schedules and still need their sleep. So yes, it's possible to work together. Unfortunately, I don't have like a set program that I can give to everybody because so many people's schedule is so different. So I
Yeah.
have to create an individual schedule oftentimes for most people.
Okay. And then another question that's come up a lot here, and also I get asked by clients, is the waking up at night and then not being able to. So
So
perhaps 4 hours
yes,
into sleep and
right.
then struggling. Any tips on that
Uh-huh.
side?
Absolutely. So this is the most common form of insomnia is you sleep for 3, 4 hours, all of a sudden you wake up and boom, you're done. So a couple of quick tips. Number one, do not look at the clock. It's the worst thing that somebody can do because you instantly do the mental math and you say, crap, it's 4 a.m. I got to be up at, 7:30. I got 3 hours more sleep. This sucks. And you think, sleep, sleep, sleep. The harder you try to sleep, the more difficult it is. I say sleep is a lot like love. The less you look for it, the more it shows up. You can't try to sleep. And so number one, don't look at the clock. Number two, if you don't have to pee, don't. So many people say, well, I'm up, I might as well get up and see if I have to go to the bathroom. Bad idea, because remember, you can't enter into a state of unconsciousness unless your heart rate is below about 60. So that being said, you go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position. Guess what? Your heart rate is a lot higher than 60 in many cases, and makes it more difficult to fall back asleep. So if you do wake up, one of the best things that you can do if you don't have to pee is relax and start doing a deep diaphragmatic breathing exercise. So what is that? That's where you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 6, and you breathe out for a count of 7. The Navy SEALs actually use this technique to help lower their heart rates and get them to sleep faster. And this is something that you can use in the middle of the night. Now, there is also a little trick that I've been playing around with recently. It doesn't work for everybody, but it seems to be effective for some people. It turns out that some people have a drop in blood sugar in the middle of the night. So if you've had a big meal within, an hour or two of going to bed, you have a huge spike in blood sugar, which means you have a huge spike in insulin. Once your body gets through all of that, it says, where's the rest of the food? And again, your cortisol level increases in order to find more food or use more resources, meaning the fat in your body. This is very alerting. So one of the things I have people to do, and this is going to sound weird, but it really does work, is have a teaspoon, not a tablespoon, a teaspoon of raw honey. So Manuka honey is the one I use. It's from New Zealand. It's really good stuff. But raw honey that's not processed, it takes your body an extended period of time to go through that, and it keeps your blood sugar stable almost all night long. I can tell you right now, in about 20-25% of the cases, they take a teaspoon of honey before bed and they sleep like a stone. It's pretty amazing. I also have a sleep supplement that's going to be hitting the market in about 60 days, and we'll let people know about that. That's designed for people who wake up in the middle of the night as well. And if you're on a ketogenic diet and you don't want to do honey, this tea that I found is actually very helpful. I don't know if my screen is available anymore. Elliot, is my screen still up there?
Yep. I can still see you. Yep.
So this is called guava leaf tea. I like this DNA brand because it's cheaper and it's super high quality. But this is what I use for a lot of my patients. Take a cup of tea like this at night. It can be very helpful as well, again, to kind of keep that blood sugar stable.
And that actually leads me into the next question that had come up a bit, and that's the supplementing. A
Mhm.
couple of things have been mentioned. First was melatonin. Another thing is people here looking like they're using marijuana to sleep. Is that
Yep.
something you recommend?
So great 2 questions, and these are probably going to be my last 2 questions because I've
Yeah.
got something coming up.
Oh, no
Um,
problem.
no problem. So melatonin. So remember, melatonin is not a sleep initiator, it's a sleep regulator. So remember, melatonin affects the sleep rhythm, not your sleep drive. Most people don't need melatonin. It's not a sleeping pill. First of all, 95% of melatonin is sold in an overdosage format. The correct dose is between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams. Most of it is sold in 3, 5, and 10 milligram dosages, so not very good. I found it at Trader Joe's, And I found that Twin Labs are the two companies that seem to make melatonin at the right dosage, number one. Number two, you should take it 90 minutes before bed. It takes that long for plasma concentration levels for it to be effective for you. So that's another thing to think about. Number three is, while I doubt we have any young females below the age of 18 who are watching, it is at high levels a contraceptive. And so it's not something to be introduced to a child's body, especially a female child's body. So if you have kids that are out there that are using melatonin, that's not a good idea. However, around age 50, we do see a decline in overall melatonin production. And so I am recommending for people over the age of 50 that melatonin might be helpful for them for sleep at night, at the right dose, at the right time. Cannabis for sleep is definitely something that's come up quite a bit lately. I live in California. We just went recreational here. So I can tell you for sure that there is special cannabis now being created for sleep. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Remember, when you're dealing with cannabis, you've got two major strains. You've got sativa and you've got indica. Indica is really the relaxation strain, and that's probably more along the lines of what you want. You need to be careful about how much you smoke. Again, just like alcohol, you don't want to smoke so much that you pass out, but you can have it, 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Again, you want to keep the dosage fairly low. And what we're really looking at from a cannabis standpoint is a THC to CBD ratio, about 8 to 1. Most cannabis dispensaries, you can go in and they will actually give you the readout of what the flower is, or the oil, or the tincture, or whatever it is that you're using, what the ratio is. But that's going to be a big factor, is kind of knowing and understanding that ratio should be around 8 to 1. Also, there are these things called terpenes that are introduced into the cannabis. Linalool is the terpene that appears to have the most effect on sleep. So what you're looking for in cannabis is an indica blend that's got linalool as a terpene, and that's going to be very sleep promoting in terms of your overall levels of sleep.
There we go. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on. Awesome information. I'm sure everyone's enjoyed it a ton. And what we'll do is we'll have a chat and work out a time perhaps when we can but go through those other questions. So once again,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And just a quick plug again, where can they find you if they want to reach out again?
Yeah, if people want to reach out, they can reach out through you, Elliot, or they can reach me through my website, which is thesleepdoctor.com. That's THESLEEPDOCTOR.com. And just put in the contact, I heard you on the poker website, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.